What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Chromecast. Today we have an interview episode with Noah Levin, who is the Director of Design at Figma. Noah and I had a really fun conversation about Figma and how they built a web-based and collaborative tool that you can use on your Chromebook to design and prototype. And we talked about FigJam, their new kind of whiteboard software service that they're offering. We talked about education and their partnership with Google and all of the cool things that they're doing there and how they are basically giving Figma to students for free and allowing them to get introduced to design. And we wrapped up with a little bit of discussion about their conference that they're doing for educators. So it was a great conversation. Hope you enjoy. With no further ado, here's my conversation with Noah. This episode of the Chromecast is brought to you by Visor. Do you manage your school district's Chromebooks? If you're tasked with getting hundreds or thousands of Chromebooks ready for students this summer, you'll want to listen to this. Visor is a Chromebook and IT asset management software designed specifically for school districts. Visor seamlessly integrates with the Google Admin Console and your student information system, including PowerSchool. With Visor, you can easily see which student has which Chromebook, manage repairs, and even automate disabling lost or stolen devices while notifying parents, all in one click. To find out how Visor can help your school manage Chromebooks, head over to visor.cloud/unboxed. That's VIZOR.cloud/unboxed, or just click the link in the show notes. Alrighty, Noah, thanks so much for taking the time to join us on the Chromecast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, we were getting caught up here a little bit right before we started rolling, and I was saying I'd looked around on your LinkedIn. You actually spent some time at Google. So anytime that we get to chat with folks that spent some time at Google, it's always fun. But love some of the work that you're doing with Figma now. So tell folks a little bit, like, what is it that you're doing over at Figma?
Yeah, sure. So I lead the design and writing teams at Figma, meaning we work on the experiences of using Figma and FigJam, making them easy to use, designing new features, doing research, all kinds of things to just make sure that the products we build are easy for people to use and that they're getting the experience they're hoping to get when they try it out. And so we're a team of about 35 people now that work on this every day. Wow,
very cool. Let's just kind of hop right into it. For any of our listeners who maybe this is their first time hearing about Figma, or you threw out kind of FigJam there too, another product that you all have. For anybody who's listening and maybe isn't familiar, what is Figma and what is FigJam?
Yeah, so Figma is a web-based design platform, and it helps teams build products together from beginning to end. And so what we're really trying to do is make sure design is more accessible to everyone, and building it on the web helps that happen, right? Because it's easier to get to on any device, whether it's kind of a entry-level Chromebook or a high-end MacBook, it doesn't matter. You can just get right in there and start making things. And so we do have two products now. And so Figma is a tool that lets people design all kinds of applications, websites, and lets them prototype them as well without writing any lines of code at all. So they can just go ahead in there and start designing the user flows, everything that they would need to kind of spell out what it should really feel like to use whatever you're designing. And FigJam is a whiteboarding product. So it's more really for anyone to just go in there and brainstorm things together with sticky notes and all kinds of stuff like that.
So we'll dig in. I want to dig into FigJam here in a little bit. But for Figma, I had read one quote from Dylan, y'all's CEO, about Figma getting early on, kind of one of the focuses was Chromebooks and building this for the web, obviously. And where was the quote? It was in this Forbes article talking about, we were testing it on Chromebooks in the early days and all of that. We love hearing that sort of stuff, obviously. We've been telling everybody about Chromebooks for a really long time, and any sort of kind of cloud-based collaborative software is obviously right up our alley. So in Figma, folks can do prototyping, right? So they're not only just working on kind of flat design. Like, this isn't just for, I'm sure people could, if they wanted to, build or design a flyer, right, or a birthday card or whatever. But within the web-based software, you're actually able to kind of link through different this click goes here, and you can actually like prototype an app or a website. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like you said, you can definitely use it for graphic design type use cases if you're building out, a brand for something and a bunch of collateral. But primarily, our bread and butter is in designing applications. So, companies like Google and Uber, New York Times, Microsoft, whoever, are using it as their main way to kind of illustrate and prototype out their core experiences that customers use for their products.
I can't remember who it was. It might have been Andy Russell and I who were talking about Screencast and some of the other products that Google was working on, but we were talking about the Figma partnership with Google. And he said something, and I might be misquoting him. I'd have to go back and look, or maybe that Google and the design team at Google are doing all of their wireframes and prototyping in Figma. Do you know of this?
Yeah. I mean, so it is a pretty large team. Obviously, there's tons of designers at Google. And while I can't speak to every individual team, there's a huge user base there of people designing their core experiences in Figma every day. So over the past couple of years, it's definitely become the predominant tool for not just kind of wireframing, but really, prototyping out and figuring out what the core experiences should really feel like. And a big reason for that is that it's one of the only really collaborative tools out there for this, meaning it's a lot like Google Docs, the way that you could just have two people on your team or more jumping into a file together and creating things in real time.
Yeah, in that you can add like annotations, right? You can add even like voice memos within there to be like, hey, what about this? Have you thought about this? It's like it's collaborative, but like even a whole nother level of collaborative, which I love.
Yeah, there's both like when you're in a jam session at the same time when you're making something, but also with things like comments and app mentioning folks. You're right. Like you could also be collaborating when you're not even at the same place in the same time. You could just be looking at files. And one of the cool things is if you are a designer at Google, for example, it used to be pretty tricky to like find a file from a teammate and like just start riffing on it or discover what kind of work is happening in your company. But because Figma has everything in one platform, you can just search for like, I want to know every project that's working on onboarding at the company. And you can actually discover and find all these great files that you can just directly kind of, riff on or collaborate with, which, when you're working more in the open in that way, it just lets you do a lot better work. You're making sure you're not, reinventing the wheel on new patterns if someone else at the company has been doing the same thing.
Sure. It's like this, like design transparency where in the past, me and Robbie and Gabriel, the partners here, we all met at a design and marketing firm, PR firm. And, you might be working on a certain file in Illustrator and someone else is working on a different file in Illustrator, and you're trying to like share notes back and forth via email. And this is like, totally fixing that and on the web, right? Which is what we always love. What was obviously the collaboration side of things is a main reason for this kind of web centric platform, but what's maybe some of the story of why this was built for like the web first? Like what was the thinking and kind of process to get to where Figma is now?
Yeah, great question. And, I know that when Dylan and Evan, the original founders, kind of got together, they met at the computer science department at Brown, and they were both really into new technologies and trying to figure out, what kind of product to build. And they had worked on everything from photo editing to meme generators and all kinds of stuff before they kind of realized there was a huge opportunity to build really high quality professional design tools in the browser. And not really anyone had been doing that at that time, in part because it was probably hard to do then and tricky for folks to figure out how to get that to work. And also people didn't realize the potential of what it would feel like to work in more of a Google Docs-X kind of way. And so I think, as they were building it, they just kind of quickly realized that there was a huge need because so many companies had all of their information about what they were building distributed across so many different places. I think a common problem people would talk about is there was no single source of truth, because even if you could find that Illustrator file you were talking about, there's a good chance that by the time you found it, it was out of date because it wasn't on the web and it wasn't real time. And so I think by having everything in the browser, just like a Google Doc, it just works and it's just up to date. You can trust that it is a good single source of truth for your teams. And so I think it caught on pretty quickly once people realized that, they were losing a lot of time by working off of the wrong specs, right? An engineer might be building from a file that's old and not up to date and not know otherwise. But when it's online, you can even just immediately see right there, which files people are working in, which ones are the truly like the latest one to work from. And so it would both save companies a lot of money from building the wrong products, but more importantly, it would allow them to build and iterate faster because they could just jump into a file and really improve the back and forth rather than writing up notes in an email.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about, so many of these startups and apps that were created where, they were moving quickly. They were moving very quickly and designing quickly and kind of breaking stuff quickly and trying to kind of get real-time feedback and being able to have this sort of collaborative process and see these files, moving back and forth without having to share stuff is just incredible. And, like this whole idea of working in sprints too and being able to do a 6-week cycle, right, where you're able to really collaborate that whole time instead of wasting that 6-week sprint really turning into 2 because you didn't have the files or whatever, I had read some quote somewhere and I'm gonna forget again which article it was from. I was doing my research and clicking around on different stuff, but it was basically like, Google Docs was the web version for Word and word processing. GitHub was like the web version for code and that sort of thing. And now you've got Figma, which is like the fix for design and prototyping. And I love that. Let's talk a little bit about FigJam because as I was reading a little bit, I love some of this backstory of how kind of FigJam came to be. And you said it's this collaborative whiteboarding, but tell folks a little bit more about this product and how they might use it, but then also like the little bit of the backstory of how it kind of came to be through the pandemic.
Yeah. Super excited about FigJam. I mean, we launched it officially a little over a year ago, and it was definitely a product born out of the realization that so many companies were working remotely through the pandemic and needed a much easier way to collaborate on all kinds of work. And I think, even prior to FigJam, we were seeing people use Figma actually for a lot of use cases like this. Even though we had built Figma to be about prototyping and designing apps and workflows, people were actually using it to host offsites for their teams and companies. They were going in there and maybe even sketching out like a floor plan or whatever for their homes and all kinds of stuff that was far outside of what I think we would have imagined initially. And so we realized that, if you're someone who hasn't used design tools for a long time, it might be intimidating to learn a tool that has a lot of these like really professional grade, tons of features to it. And what would happen if instead we simplified it dramatically so that anyone could just come in and use it? And so FigJam really starts from that philosophy. It starts from the idea that we want anyone, no matter if they have a design degree or not, to be able to come in here and collaborate visually. And so by doing that, we decided to simplify things and make a toolbar at the bottom of the whiteboarding interface that is super friendly and tactile. It has sticky notes that you can see right away or a big pen. Whereas if you're in a professional tool, like you kind of want the interface to almost get out of the way so you can focus on what you're really designing in high amounts of detail. And so the needs of these products, it's been really cool to see us evolve them over time so that we can really make sure they're serving the needs of the people using them. And so FigJam has already grown a ton in popularity since we started it and since it's come out because it's so easy to use, easy to jump into, and just kind of like, honestly, it's replaced most of the way we have meetings now at the company. And as we're seeing, even companies like Google as well are doing this, where, instead of having a conversation over Zoom where you might just be jotting notes down in a doc somewhere, you have this whiteboard together where you can jump in and, whether it's a retro you're organizing, whether you're just brainstorming ideas for a new feature, whatever it might be, it's just really easy to get in there and hopefully have a lot of fun doing it. We have things like stickers and widgets. You can roll a dice or jump in and, randomize who's going next if you're taking turns speaking, all kinds of fun stuff that, you can kind of take the things that work about a physical whiteboard and augment them in a digital world to be a lot more playful.
Yeah, and it's that I'm assuming it's all completely kind of free form floating, and you can, because that's the thing about a whiteboard, right? Like that's the reason we love the whiteboard. It's the reason I write notes a lot of times rather than typing, because typing is linear, right? You get this line and then this line, and you can't draw an arrow and be like, well, but back up to this thing, and what about this, and how does this go down here, right? And so you all are creating that in a virtual space, and especially giving that tool to folks during the pandemic when everyone was trying to figure out, like, how do we have meetings anymore? We're gonna all sit around on Skype all day. these endless Skype meetings that nobody liked. So adding this like collaboration to it, yeah, it's something that we're definitely interested in. We love having digital versions of things, even if we can maybe have some conversation on the physical whiteboard, but then for the remote employees, for our remote employees, being able to do this virtual thing whenever we want to have a full team chat. Yeah, we're gonna be using that in the near future. I love it. Yeah. So both of these products, free services, subscription-based services. How are folks, if they're like, wow, this sounds amazing, I want to go try out both of these, how can you access them?
Yeah, definitely. So because it's just a web-based product, you can just go to figma.com and get Figma and FigJam for free right away, and try it out. We do have, of course, paid tiers depending on what you're trying to do. If you're just kind of exploring on your own and doing, whether it's drawing something in Figma or doing a quick lightweight collaborative session in FigJam, you can do that. But if you're more of a company or a team with lots of people collaborating on lots of files, then we definitely have paid tiers for that, which give you access to even more features. So there's definitely a free plan that we recommend. And also for education purposes, it's free for everyone. And so, when folks validate their education domain or things like that, they can use the professional tier for free as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, because, this was some pretty big news that when we saw this come out, we were like, whoa, this is really cool. Google partners with Figma to give students access to, professional design tools and prototyping tools. So how did this come about, and what is kind of that EDU focus? And was that like a shift for you all, or was it kind of natural? Like, how did this come to be?
Yeah, good question. In some ways, I think it was pretty natural, because there's a lot of similarities in the kinds of things Google and Chromebooks are trying to do, and a lot of the things we're trying to do, right? Just, make it easier to get access to information, no matter who you are, where you are, and ideally in a free, easy to use kind of way. And so I think there's a lot of similarities and alignments there when you think about what a school would like to do with a Chromebook and make it easy to open it and do all your basic tasks, whether it's, document writing or email. We think visual collaboration, like with FigJam and Figma, is one of those primitive core tasks that you'd want to do in those environments. And so, we were really excited to partner with Google and basically, give US high school students and educators, free access to this tool, and make sure that it's just there right away when you open that Chromebook for the first time, and you can just kind of jump in and start making things. And it's been honestly amazing to see how many different educators and students have been using it for things far outside of, I think, what I would have imagined, 5 years ago when we started working on some of this. And, you're just seeing, anything from like professional grade things for high school students that are getting into entrepreneurship or technology classes, because those students might be building, high fidelity prototypes and maybe even connecting their designs to code in some way. Or maybe there's school clubs that are designing assets for like a yearbook or something. But with FigJam, it's expanded the range of classes dramatically, because you can imagine using it for any kind of class, whether you're doing an icebreaker, a class brainstorm, mapping out anything visual, like a historical timeline of something, or a science class that's like looking at a bunch of diagrams and annotating them together. It's kind of amazing to see how many different use cases kind of prop up once you have access, right? Once you can actually use one of these tools.
So is this targeted, or is the partnership through K through 12, or is it a high school level thing?
Yeah, we're primarily working with high school students. If you are K through 12, there are, of course, like some policies that make it tricky for some access. I forget, the COPA, I think is the name of that policy. We can look more of that up later. But so primarily working at high school students, but definitely we're seeing usage across the board from other classrooms as well. But the primary part of the partnership is for high schools.
Yeah, I would think like the technicality of this and the skill set level, would lend itself better to that 9th through 12th grade.
Yeah, I think for Figma, that's definitely true. For FigJam, the hope is that it's easy enough that anyone can really just get in there and start drawing. Yeah.
So you mentioned something about kind of connecting to code. So this is one thing Andy Russell and I chat about just briefly, but this kind of idea of not only design and how design is in everything, right? If you're designing an app or designing a website or whatever, but then there's just design all around us. So teaching kind of the fundamentals of design through something like Figma, but then also this computer science side of it as well, and the ability to actually create some code from this. And if they're prototyping an app, maybe being able to see some of that. Can you explain a little bit about how that works and what use cases there might be for that?
Yeah, I actually think there's a bunch of different ones we could cover. I mean, so FigJam, for example, has even something called code widgets, which are these code blocks that you can drop onto the canvas and actually just start typing code together in a collaborative way and actually see a couple code blocks side by side. And if you're teaching, it's probably a really great way to like start to annotate and discuss and add notes about what's working and what isn't. And people even could learn through creating those widgets to begin with if they wanted to. We have all kinds of resources on how to build your own collaborative tools. But then there's the other side of it, which you alluded to, which is when you're designing real products, like how does that relate to code? How does the work that you're drawing out visually map to what your engineers would need if they're building it out? And what's cool about being a web-based product is a lot of these concepts that a web developer might be drawing out, whether they're just kind of writing some HTML and CSS, at the end of the day, they're all the same kind of visual constructs that we would need when you're drawing a rectangle on a screen like Figma. And so we have all kinds of projects in the works. Some of them are already out. Things like you can click on a component and very quickly inspect the code aspects of it. You can see what CSS would be used to render it, in a pretty clear way. And we've got all kinds of new investments I can't quite talk about yet in this area because we think that it's a huge opportunity to help designers and developers work a lot more closely together so that they can really be speaking the same language. Because at the end of the day, like they're going to be the developer needs, to figure out how to create these visual constructs. The designer's doing the same thing. And so how can you make those worlds feel more close?
Yeah, and sometimes they're saying the same thing, but saying it in two totally different ways and not communicating.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was right after college, I was working with a startup that was in the process of building an app, but I just wanted to look like this. Well, yeah, we can do this. I just want it to look like this. Yeah, there's always that disconnect. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to see some of that work. That's interesting. And it's crazy as you're kind of going through all of this. The one thing I kind of keep coming back to is just how web technologies have evolved so much to allow for all of this happening. Like, it's incredible. We were building websites. I've been in kind of the web development space for, several years, and seeing the evolution there is cool. But you all are just taking it to like a whole different level. It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, that's a whole other side of the partnership here is, if we, as we're building this, uncover Chromium bugs or things like that, it's so great to have the partnership with Google to just kind of reach out and be like, hey, like, here's some things that APIs we might be missing or other kinds of things. And it's really amazing to see how incredible that team is and how much we've been able to work together to make sure that this product is, as performant and using these cutting edge technologies as possible.
I love that. I didn't even think about that. That's incredible. So if a student, say, is building a wireframe for a web page, or maybe they're working on an app, what is that process like if they wanted to actually try to create that app and maybe even try to launch that app? What would that process be like, going from Figma to whatever that next step is? And I don't even know, so educate me here. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, it will depend a lot on, if you're talking about an individual just by themselves doing something versus a designer at a large company that has infrastructure in place. And so happy to touch on both. If you're an individual, like you mentioned, then you would open Figma. You might even start with FigJam if you're just figuring out what it is you're trying to build, right? If you're just in the like brainstorming phase, you'd probably start with FigJam. You'd do some research. You might capture some screenshots from different companies that are doing similar things to you, and start to kind of flesh out maybe even a storyboard of like, what is the journey that an average user is going to come across when they use this product. And eventually it'll start start to take shape. You'll start to have a better sense of what screens you need. And then you move over to Figma at that point to really wireframe out or design out each of the screens that are important. And let's say you're building a mobile app, you would even be able to use Figma's prototyping tools to actually like connect different parts of that flow so that you could hand your phone to someone who doesn't have to know anything about Figma and show them a demo and have them click on the different parts of your interface that you've created. And, then there's, of course, the whole other step, like you mentioned, of like, how do you go from that to building it? But the interesting thing here is that sometimes the hardest part, of course, there's the aspect of building it, but it's making sure you're building the right thing. And so I think Figma really focuses on how do we help you make sure that you are building the right thing so you don't end up spending 6 months or a year designing something, handing it off to engineers, building it, and then it turned out that wasn't actually what customers wanted or it wasn't easy to use. So really, we think that a whole part of one of the most important parts of the journey is just prototyping it to begin with and having people try it out. But then, of course, when you build it, you'd want to figure out what architecture you're going to use, what way you want it, and you might use any number of tools for that. So it kind of depends. And we don't want Figma to be too prescriptive there because the reality is there are so many different programming environments that might be successful for different needs. And so we kind of try to remain a bit agnostic and let you maybe switch in the inspect panel, for example. We let you switch between iOS code samples, Android code samples, and HTML. Yeah, so you can kind of get a sense for what environment you might be in. You can also, people build plugins. Figma has an open API that's pretty easy to use and would allow folks to integrate directly with their environment in different ways. So some companies, like I know GitHub even, for their icon set, I think it was called like Octagons, was designed in Figma, and they wrote this plugin that let them immediately import all of those icons into their code base so that if they made a change in the icon set, they could just run this plugin and have all the code behind the scenes be updating their environment. And so this kind of makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you're making a change to your front end, you can imagine living in a future world where any change you make is almost real time in the application. And so I think that's kind of what it starts to get to over time, we hope.
Yeah. There's so many cool applications here, and especially like you said, like you all can really kind of have this process, this design process from now FigJam all the way through the full kind of design process, which is interesting. Like I love that. I do want to go back. I forgot to hit on this, and I was looking through my notes here for education folks. So when with this partnership, when Chromebooks get deployed, is Figma, is it an app? Is it like a PWA that's already installed? Or is it, how are you all encouraging students to go to Figma once they've opened up their Chromebook? Is it pre-installed in any sort of way, or is this just something that you all are encouraging students to go check out?
Yeah, good question. I think it'll depend on the environment that's set up ahead of time. For those that are working through the partnership, we do have tools for admins to deploy it easily for their schools so that they would just see it naturally as one of the apps directly on your screen, so you can get right into it. For others that either haven't gone through that partnership or are doing it their own way, they might just simply go to the website if they need to and do it that way.
Sure. Is this fully rolled out? Like, is this in beta or anything right now, or is this something that educators that might be listening can go check out right now? Because I feel like I remember there was a beta phase at one point, but I can't remember the details.
Yeah, so right now it is technically in beta. And so what you do is you go to figma.com/Chromebooks and you just apply right there. And so that's really the way to go for now. And that just allows us, of course, to continue to learn as we go and figure out if this is easy enough for school administrators to get going with. And so, yeah, right now it is a beta. But of course, that shouldn't stop anyone who is looking to just get started and learn it right away if they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is an amazing resource. Like, this is an incredible resource for educators. And as we've kind of sat here and talked through it, I'm thinking of all these different applications and ways that it could be used. So definitely encourage, if you're listening to this, if you're an educator or school faculty, definitely go check this out. We'll make sure to link everything down in the show notes and everything. One other thing I want to hit on is a Edu Focused Conference that you all are doing. What's the name again? Commons.
Yeah, Commons.
Yeah. So tell folks a little bit about Commons and what you all are trying to do with that.
Yeah, we're super excited about this. It's our first time running a virtual conference for educators. And so Commons, which happens on August 16th and 17th, coming up soon, basically tries to just elevate diverse educator voices and inspire new ideas of what's possible possible if people can create things together really easily. And so it's a free event. I'm actually going to be speaking on a panel for it. And so a couple of
Everyone has to tune in. Go watch Noah.
Yeah, you gotta join that part. It should be a lot of fun. I mean, the hope is that just it is a place for people to talk about education, to talk about what, role being able to create things together plays in that. And we're super excited to see how it goes.
That's awesome. As excited as we are about any sort of kind of cloud computing software that's out there, like anything that we can find to tell folks to go try out that they can do in a browser, is something we want to talk about. So we do really appreciate you taking the time to kind of chat through a little bit of what you all have been working on. But what's kind of what's something that you're excited about? What's kind of the next thing, or kind of something that you've been working on that you're just super excited about?
Oh, how do I pick just one?
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be just one. It could be whatever.
Yeah. Well, one thing that could be good to touch on, we've talked about like the role that Figma and FigJam are starting to play on Chromebooks and education. But there's something almost behind that idea that could be interesting to touch on, which is just like, what does it mean to teach design to people? What does it mean to not just learn a tool, but learn a practice of design in more places? And, obviously, this has been a huge part of my life personally, designing for a long time. And I've just seen how much it can change anything from companies to the way that you learn. Like design process teaches you a lot about asking questions to understand your environment, to break down problems and to solve them. And I think that practice is something that could be taught a lot earlier in different ways. It's not just, making things look nice, but it's about solving problems in a way that is easy to use for people. And so one thing I would mention that I'm excited about is just like to think about how design education in general can improve and can help people, whether or not they pursue a career in it, can actually like learn really important collaborative skills, research skills, build emotional intelligence, because so much of our job is understanding people. Like in college, I had to study psychology. It was a requirement in the program I took, because that's a big part. We're only making things for people. So, understanding how we think, how we work is a big part of that. And that just seems like a useful life skill. So that's definitely one thing I'm super excited about. And when it comes to Figma things, I mean, definitely FigJam is very top of mind lately. Just this idea that, we're expanding reach to this tool that allows people to make things together. And just thinking in particular about one of the trends that I've noticed is, what's the balance at work between when you're having a meeting in real time and when you're working asynchronously? And I think that's a theme that is really top of mind for us, because both are important in a remote world, right? Like you need a moment where you're jamming together on something and just seeing where those ideas can flow. But you also need a way, if you're in a different time zone or don't have access to that meeting, whatever it might be, to still participate in the process and to contribute an idea and do it easily. And so I think that's definitely a theme that I'm excited about, is like, what's the balance of our product? For example, in FigJam, we have a timer, and you can like set activities against a timer and really just like help each other stay kind of, focused for that time block, which is a great synchronous use case, but it may not be relevant if you're working and looking at a file later. So I think there's all kinds of stuff in those two areas that come up, and that's definitely one top of mind thing for me.
I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, I had a summer program that I did, and my focus during that was learning Illustrator, and it was super basic, but I was interested in design stuff and didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. And so I was like, I'll do this. This is fun. And so much of it was the emotion that you're creating, this whole user experience, right, of design and kind of that emotional side of it. And I think it's incredible that you all are building a tool that's teaching folks that, and that that's everywhere. It's in the apps that we use every single day. Mm-hmm. When you open up Instagram and scroll through, if you're opening up whatever productivity tool that you use or whatever, there's design there. And so I think you all creating, this collaborative and web-based platform that's kind of everywhere, right? And that's the thing that we love about Chrome OS and the web is this kind of full distribution of something, right? And available to anybody who wants to go check it out. So we love it.
Yep.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. This has been so much fun, and I hope that everybody learned a few things. I sure did. So we'll make sure to link all the stuff that we chatted about down in the show notes. But yeah, Noah, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate you joining us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
All right, we'll catch up again soon. See ya.